In this video, I'm going to show how you can add shopping cart functionality to your Bubble app, where you can let users add multiple items to a shopping cart, view those items on a checkout page, and then purchase the items using Stripe. You'll see here we have 4 line items, different quantities, and a mixture of subscription and one-off purchases. When we click on the checkout button, we're going to be brought to a Stripe checkout page, and you can see the 4 line items are presented there nicely and one total amount. We're going to start off by looking at our database setup. And before I do that, I just want to say that this app is going to be linked in the description below, and it is viewable to everyone. So you can go in and see the database setup yourself. You can see here we have 3 data types on top of the standard user data type. And I'm going to start off with this product data type. So product is essentially the list of products that are going to be available for sale on your platform. So you can see here I have 4 products. And we have 6 different fields associated with the product data type. There's a description, which is a description of the product itself. There's frequency, which is only relevant for subscription products. So if this subscription is set to yes, and it is a subscription product where the user is charged either daily, weekly, monthly, or annually, then this becomes relevant, and you'll need to have either a day, a week, a month, or a year value for this field. If it's a one-off payment, you can leave it blank. These are all my suggestions as to how to set up your database. You may have a better way yourself. That's completely fine. Image is an image that represents a product. So the image of the t-shirt here represents the t-shirt. The name of the product and the price in cents. And the reason we're using it in cents rather than in dollars is because Stripe does not accept decimal amounts. And when we're creating our checkout session later with Stripe, we're going to need to input the value in cents. The next data type I want to look at is the cart item. So this is very similar to the product data type, and indeed the two are linked. You can see there's quite a bit of overlap in terms of the fields associated with these 2 data types. Frequency is also relevant here, and then total cost is also relevant here, although it's a bit different to price cents field that we had in the product data type. You can see it's actually linked to the product data type itself. So what we're going to use this for is that when a user is on a product page, like they are now with this t-shirt, once they click the add to cart button, what happens there is it's transforming this from a product into a cart item. Let me take a quick look at how that works in the workflow. If we go onto the product page, click on this add to cart workflow, what you'll see is we're creating a new cart item, and it's very much linked to the parent group product which is on this page. Going back to our database, the next thing I want to look at is the user data type. We have 2 different custom fields here. In reality, you're probably going to have more on your own Bubble app, but these 2 are what I think is necessary at the bare minimum if you want to use that shopping cart functionality. The first one is this customer ID. This is going to be a value that's returned from Stripe, and it means that when the user goes to purchase a second, a third, a fourth set of goods, in terms of it being a second or third or fourth transaction, they're not going to have to re-input their credit card details because it'll be saved down thanks to this customer ID. And then finally, this is key. So shopping cart. Each user is going to have a unique shopping cart, which will be accessed by clicking on this icon up here. And that is essentially a list of cart items. So you can see here it's going to be a multiple one of the 5 of these items. Just have a look at how that looks in our database. If we go to users, you can see here the most recent user, Bruce Wayne 55 at testmail.com. Their shopping cart here, it's a number of cart items. Now that we've gone over our database setup, I'm going to go through how you might showcase the various products in your database. You can see here we have 4 products, and they're visible in the database as well. What I would use to showcase the products is a repeating group. So I'm going to grab a repeating group from the container section of my Bubble editor. I'm going to drop it onto the page, and I'm going to set the type of content to product. I'm then going to do a search for products. I'm not going to set any constraints because I'm happy to pull them all in. I'm not going to set a fixed number of rows, and I'm also not going to set a fixed number of columns. What I am going to do is I'm going to set the minimum height of the row to about 200 pixels, and I'm going to set the min width of the column to about 240 pixels. You can see here now we've 1, 2, 3, 4 different items coming in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start dropping in various elements. I'm going to grab an image, put that in there. I'm also going to set the layout of the container to be a column. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say dynamic image is going to be current sell products image. Let's do a quick preview of that and see how it looks. And you can see there we're getting our 4 items in. You could also add in text elements to represent the name and the price of each product. I'm not going to go through that now, but like I said, I will leave the editor open for everyone to view, so you can do so if you wish. I'm going to delete this repeating group for now, and the next thing we want to do is build an individual product page for each of these products. So if we go up to our drop down up here and click on product, what you'll see is if I click on the page name here, I've set the type of content on this page to product. And what happens is when we go back to our index page, and if we click on one of the products, you'll see I have a workflow associated with this. What I'm doing is I'm navigating the user to the product page and I'm sending the current sales product. So that means when I click on the flip-flops here, and let's refresh the page first. And now when I click on flip-flops, we're sending the flip-flop data to the product page, and all this information here is getting populated. If we take a quick look at the various items on the product page, you can see here we have a group. The type of content in the group is product. The data source is parent groups product. And if we click on the group beyond that, again, you can see the type of content is product, and the data source is the current page product. So in this case, it's going to be flip-flop. As a result, we're pulling in the image for the flip-flop, we're pulling in the name of the flip-flop, and we're pulling in the description. The next thing I want to go through is the workflow associated with this add to cart button. You'll see here we have 2 different workflow actions associated. One is triggered when the user is logged in, and one is triggered when the user is logged out. What is happening when the user is logged out is that we're just showing an alert message asking them to log in, because I really think you only want to be adding items to a cart when the user is logged in. I'm going to recreate this workflow because it's quite important. So let's delete that. And what we're doing is we're taking this add to cart button, which is actually a group, and we're saying when an element is clicked, group add to cart, and we're only triggering this one when the current user is logged in. So we're doing a few things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new thing. That new thing is going to be a cart item. And then we're going to set all of these fields here. The first one we're going to set is frequency. And the frequency of the cart item is going to be equal to the parent group's product frequency. Again, this is only going to be relevant when the parent group item is a subscription product. We should try and capture it anyway. And if it turns up as blank because it's a one-off purchase, that's fine. The next thing we're going to do is actually link it to the product itself. So the product is going to be parent group's product. Quantity is going to be equal to the drop-down quantities value. So if we go back to our design tab, you'll see here I've set up a drop-down, and this just gives you the option to choose the quantity of each product you're adding to the cart. Next thing we're going to be setting is the subscription, and this is going to be equal to the parent group's product subscription. We want this to come in as a yes or no value. You would have seen this when we were going through the database earlier, but it's just identifying whether the product we're adding to the cart is a one-off purchase or a subscription purchase. And the last one we want to set is total cost. Now, total cost is effectively going to be the value of the entire line item. So for example, instead of the cost of it being 1 t-shirt, if we're adding 4 t-shirts to the cart, we want to multiply the cost of each individual t-shirt by the quantity of t-shirts we're purchasing. So what we're going to do is we're going to say parent group's products price in cents, which will get us to the cost of 1 line item. And then we want to multiply that by drop down quantities value. So we're creating a new cart item, and maybe before we go any further, we might just show that. So if we refresh that particular page, what we'll see is if we wanted to add, say, 10 flip-flops to the cart at $25 each, let's click add to cart. And then if we go back into our database and go to all cart items, you'll see here we have a new entry, 10 t-shirts. The cost of each individual one is going to be $25, but we multiply by 10, we get to $250. Now that we've created that cart item, we want to actually add it to the current user's shopping cart. So what we're going to do is we're going to make changes to the current user. The thing we're going to change is their shopping cart. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the result of step 1's cart item. So we're now taking the cart item that we created in step 1, and in step 2 we're adding it to the current user's shopping cart. The last thing we want to do is we want to notify the user that they have indeed added an item to their shopping cart. So what I've done is I've created this alert. It simply says added to cart. And I just want to display this on the page when the user adds something to their cart. So we're going to use the show message in an alert box action, and the element is going to be added to cart. Let's just refresh that one more time and show how it looks. And this time let's just add 3 pairs of flip-flops to our shopping cart. Click on add to cart. We get the alert displayed, and we might just take a look at the current user. Their shopping cart item, and you can see here there's an additional item that's come in on the back of that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a checkout page. And the checkout page is going to be what happens when you click on this little icon up here, the shopping cart icon. So you're aware that is just a simple icon that I've put in there. We're then brought to this checkout page. And on the checkout page, you can see all the cart items that we've added to the current user. If we take a look at what that actually is in our editor, it's simply a repeating group here that takes all the cart items added by the current user. You can see their data source being current user shopping cart, and displays various information, the actual product name, the quantity, the cost per item, and then the total cost. You'll see where we have a quantity of more than one. The total cost is simply the cost per item multiplied by the quantity. It's quite straightforward. What is a bit more complex is what happens when we click on the checkout button here. I'm just going to go back into the editor to show what's going on there. So when button checkout is clicked, we're triggering a few things. And before I get into this, I'm going to show you the plugin you'll need to install. If you go to the plugin section of your Bubble editor and you search for the Stripe Checkout Shopping Cart plugin, you'll see I have it installed here already. This basically allows us to create a Stripe checkout session I showed at the very start of the video, where we can pay for all the items in our shopping cart at one time. We are going to need to do some configuration here to make this work. So what you need to do is you need to go over to your Stripe dashboard. Okay, so I'm in the Stripe dashboard. You'll see I'm in test mode at the moment, just because I'm testing this out. And in order to correctly configure the plugin, you need to go to the Developers tab of your Stripe dashboard, and you need to click on API keys. And what we need to do is we need to reveal the secret key here. We need to copy it. Then we go back to the Stripe Checkout Shopping Cart plugin, and we need to fill out these 2 fields for test mode first of all. I'm going to delete them just so you can see what I'm doing. So again, I've copied this secret key. I'm going to paste that straight into the Stripe secret key dev field. And then what I'm going to do for the API key dev field is I'm going to type in the word bearer. I'm going to put in a space, and I'm going to paste the exact same key in again. So you'll see here, this is exactly the same with this, but this field here has bearer and a space before it. Simple as that to configure the plugin. There's also some detailed documentation available at this URL, which will describe how to do that in more detail. Okay, back to our workflow. There's 4 steps involved in checking out. The first thing you need to do is to create a new transaction. That is the last data type you might remember from our database. There's a number of fields associated with it. You can leave it blank. And the reason you can leave it blank is we actually want to change it later on in the workflow here. The second step is probably the most complex. This is where we're actually creating the Stripe checkout session where we can pay for all the items that we've added to our shopping cart. The first thing we're going to need to fill out here is the success URL. And maybe instead of me going through all of these individually, what I might do is recreate it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this, and this, and we'll just delete all of it to make it very clear. So step 1, like I said, create a new thing. This new thing we're creating is a transaction. We're leaving it blank. The second thing we're doing is we're going to plugins. We're going to Stripe create checkout session cart, and we have to fill out all these fields. The very first thing I want to fill out is a success URL. This is where the user is redirected to after they successfully completed the payment. And in my Bubble app, I've created this page, which is called Payment Successful. It's quite a simple page. It just says your payment was successful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this URL here from this part on. I don't need the debug mode equals true. And I'm going to go back to that workflow I was creating. And I'm going to paste this in as the success URL. There's one more thing I want to add into it, and we'll obviously want to find out after the payment whether or not it was successful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a parameter at the end of here that's going to say transaction equals result of step 1's unique ID. So what am I doing here? I'm taking the transaction that was created in step 1. I'm taking the unique ID that's associated with that. Just to show you every single transaction that will be created, it has a unique ID down here. And I'm adding that to the end of the URL. We're doing that because we're going to be able to identify information from the transaction from that unique ID later on. So this will become more clear once we actually trigger a transaction, but for now, just make sure you put in that unique ID as a parameter. Cancel URL, it's going to be quite similar. I'm actually just going to send the user back to the index page if they were not successful or to cancel their transaction. So I'm going to copy this URL here. And if we go back to that workflow, check out. I'm going to paste that in there. And again, we're going to add that transaction parameter. So I'm going to say transaction equals result of step 1 and its unique ID. The price in cents is going to be current user's shopping cart, and then we're going to go for each item's total cost. So you might remember total cost is the value of the product multiplied by the quantity, and we're doing that for each item in the current user's shopping cart. Quantity going to be very similar. It's going to be current user's shopping cart, and then we're going to go down here to each item's quantity. The currency, I'm leaving it in US dollars here. You can change it to another currency. You must make sure that this currency is supported by Stripe, and you must also make sure that it's a 3-digit ISO code, which you can get by Googling. Product name, very simple, current users, shopping cart, each item's product, and then each item's name. And then subscription options. These are only necessary if the user has the option to purchase subscription products. So if your app is purely selling one-time purchase items, you do not need to fill out these fields. But if there's even a possibility that the user will be able to purchase subscription items via this workflow, you're going to need to fill these out. And before I do, maybe just go back to our database and into cart items. You'll see here there's a bunch of cart items, and you can see here this one is subscription field is set to no, and its frequency is blank. But if we go to an actual subscription product, you'll see a subscription is set to yes, and the frequency is set to month. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say current users shopping cart, and then we're going to go down to each item's subscription. So this is effectively going to go to a list of yes or no's. And then finally for frequency, we're going to say current users shopping carts, and then we're going to say each item's frequency, which will be blank for the non-subscription items, but we'll have a value in there for the actual subscription items. And again, that frequency value, it must be either day, week, month, or year. Okay, so now what we need to do is we want to make some changes to the transaction that we created in step 1 because we filled out all this information. So what we're going to do is we're going to make changes to a thing. The thing is going to be the transaction created in step 1. And what we're going to change is the checkout session ID. So this is going to be the unique ID associated with the Stripe checkout session. And this is going to be really important for us pulling in information after the transaction has occurred. So what I'm going to say is result of step 2 and each checkout session ID. And then the last thing I'm going to do before I navigate to the actual checkout session is I can also pull in the total amount by going to result of step 2 and putting in amount. That's all the hard work done. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to a page. We're not going to go to a page. We're going to go to open an external website, and it's going to be the result of step 2 and the URL that's created there. So let's take a look at our shopping cart page and see if this works. Click on that. Okay, you can see here we have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 line items in our shopping cart. And we're just going to quickly tot up here how much this should cost. So just looking at this, that should be 90, that should be 165, 200. So 208 is what I'm expecting here for the total cost. Let's see if that'll all work out. And we're brought to our Stripe checkout page. And there's a bit of an issue here because you can see here they're charging us 508 in total rather than the 208 that I expected. And I can see the issue here is with the flip-flops. So they're charging us 225 for 3 pairs of flip-flops, which seems quite excessive. So let's go back and figure out what's going on there. You can see here because we didn't pay, we're being brought to the home page and we're getting that unique ID from the transaction. But let's figure out what went wrong there. So I think what happened was price cents. We were putting in each item's total cost. Let's try and change that to current user shopping cart, each item's products, and then each item's price in cents. So rather than calculating the total cost here, what we're just going to take is the price of the individual product, and then Stripe is going to take the price multiplied by the quantity to get to our overall total cost. Let's see if that works now. Back to our shopping cart, and let's click on checkout again. Yeah, so that gets the 208 that I was expecting. So the issue again there was, just to reiterate, instead of putting in the total cost for each item, which is effectively this value here, we're just putting in the cost per item, and then Stripe takes the cost per item, multiplies by the quantity to get to where we want to be. Let's pay for that, and we'll see where we direct it to. So I'm just going to use some dummy details here, and you can see here that we're clicking on the subscribe button because we actually have a subscription within these items here, and this user is going to be billed $15 a month going forward. So let's click on subscribe. And we're redirected to the payment successful page. And again, we're capturing the unique ID of the transaction in the URL. And let's see what happened there, because if we go on to our payment successful page, what I'm actually doing is when I'm loading the page and the transaction value in the page URL is not empty, which it's not in this case, you can see there is a value in there for a transaction, I'm doing something. And what I'm doing is I'm capturing some of the information associated with that transaction. I'm adding in the currency, and I'm adding in the payment status, which is really important. And the way you get these is, I'm going to recreate this because it's quite important actually. Put it in a workflow action there. What we're going to do is we're going to make changes to a thing. The thing we're going to change is do a search for transaction. And the transaction we want to change is the one where the unique ID equals get data from page URL. Parameter name is going to be transaction. And then we're going to get the first item. So what we're effectively doing is we're searching for the first item in the database where the transaction equals this unique ID. And what we want to change is we want to change the payment status. And what we do for that is we want to get data from an external API. We want to retrieve checkout session details. This is another API call that comes with the plugin. The checkout session ID is going to be this transaction's checkout session ID. That is why we saved it down earlier on, so we can use that to get the checkout session details here. And we want to go down here to we want to go to payment status, which is down here, which will effectively tell us whether it's been paid for or not. We also want to put in currency here. So again, I'm going to go to get data from an external API, retrieve checkout session details, this transaction's checkout session ID, and its currency. There's a whole bunch of other things you can add in there you might have seen. You can use that however you wish. So that's what the changes are for the transaction. We also want to make changes to the current user. We want to first of all clear their shopping cart because they have now successfully paid for the items in their shopping cart, there's no reason to still have them in there. And then we also want to add in the customer ID from that API call. The reason we want to do that is if they're ever coming back to our platform and purchasing further goods, they won't need to put in their credit card details going forward. See here we have a couple of issues, so let's just see what that is. Oh yes, I forgot to fill this out the second time. So what we want to do is retrieve checkout session details. And we're going to do result of step 1. Yeah, and that clears that up. But just to show you why we capture the customer ID, what I'm going to, or maybe before I do that, let's just have a look at our database actually. So if we go down to transactions and we look at the most recent transaction, we can see that the payment status has been changed to paid because we did successfully paid for it. That's the $208 that we paid for. You can see the one thing that did not go through here was the customer, and we probably do want to associate this with the customer. It's already captured here by the created by in terms of it being Bruce Wayne 55, but the way we can make sure that works going forward is just on the checkout page. When we are making changes to that transaction, what we can do is we can say customer equals current user and put in their email there. So one last thing I want to show is how you can save down a customer ID so that they don't have to re-input their payment details if they've already done it once. So what we're going to do is at the very bottom of this Stripe create checkout session action, I've just added this field here called customer ID. And you might remember we've already saved down the customer ID from the payment successful page. You might remember here, we've added the customer ID in there. So we're just going to take that ID and we're going to use it on our checkout page. We're going to say customer ID equals current user's customer ID. You can leave this blank if you're not saving in customer IDs or you just don't want to, purely optional. But if you do save it down, what you can do is we can add another item to our cart, which should now be blank. So it should be the first item that we're adding to the cart. Let's just add a t-shirt. And then once we go to our checkout page and we click on the checkout button, we'll once again be brought to the Stripe checkout page. And you can see this time I don't need to put my payment details in again. They've already been saved down from the last time. So that's it for this tutorial. If you have any questions, you can let me know in the comment section and I will leave that demo app link in the description as well.